Well, hello again, Fusion City Church Connect groups. Hope that you guys are having a great week so far and have had a good time with your groups already today. We're in Romans 13 this week, and I'm just a big fan of the book of Romans in general, and so I really appreciate how Paul comes at a lot of the topics and issues that he speaks to, and so we'll get to that in just a minute. Before we do, again, just kind of keeping some stuff in front of you guys as we try to do every week. We really encourage you to take a look at that events link in the Church Center app, and in there you're going to be able to just be aware of all the things that we have coming up together as Fusion City Church. A couple of those things that are coming up now. We've got the Night of Worship on November 20th, and then our kind of packing party and another event coming together on December the 4th. And so those things are coming up over the next couple of weeks, and the details are in that events link on the Church Center app. So make sure you're checking that weekly for updates and any changes in information that are happening there. So with that, do want to get into Romans 13 this week. Just call out a couple of talking points that stick out to me every time I get to this chapter in Romans. It's a really good reminder. It seems interesting to me, maybe providential, that we would end up or be in Romans 13 heading into the month of November in a midterm election year. And so because Romans 13 right out of the gate, Paul is going to speak to us about our relationship with the governing authorities that are placed in leadership over us. And he says right here at the outset that all of us should be subject to governing authorities, for none of those authorities end up in place unless it's God that puts them there. And because it's God that puts them there for us to resist or reject or be obstinate in opposition to the governing authorities that are over us, that's to incur judgment on ourselves, because we believe as followers of Christ that no person or no people or no group comes to power unless God allows it. And so he even says that, rulers, good or bad, we should, as followers of Christ, accept the authority that is over us and submit to them in a fashion that is commensurate with their position, right up until the point where they call us to do something that would put us in opposition to things that God has to say. And so again, as we get into this election season, just remember that nothing that happens in this world catches God off guard, and the authorities that are put into place, that they end up there as a result of God's allowance, that God allows those things to happen. And then just one more key takeaway for me from Romans 13 is in chapter 13, but verse 8 through 10 in that area, and where actually we've been talking about this the last several weeks in our Win at Home series. Just this idea of the relationship between relationships and the law, that Jesus called us to live in relationship with him, and how the laws of the old covenant kind of find themselves rooted in and fulfilled in this new commandment from Christ to love. And Paul, again, like he does in 1 Corinthians, we've been talking about in our parenting conversations, kind of echoes that same thought here in Romans 13, where he says this. He says, owe no one anything except to love each other, for the one who loves one another has fulfilled the law. For the commandments, and he's going to cite for us 4 of the 10 commandments here. He says, for the commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and any other commandment are summed up in this word, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And so I just love here how Paul points that out and reminds us to that idea that if we're loving God well and if we're loving others well, we are fulfilling the commandments of the old covenant. We're fulfilling the 10 commandments when we love God and love others. And Paul draws our attention to that here. Maybe that was a takeaway from you. Maybe some of that resonated with you coming on the heels of this last series where we had a lot of conversation around that idea. So I hope that sparks some thought, maybe some additional conversation. Have some conversation in your group right now about how your relationships with others are impacted by your love for them. Talk about how we manage life in relationship based on Jesus' command to love. And maybe, as much as you're able, have some good spirited conversation about the political season that we find in, and how all things happen according to God and his sovereignty, and how the rulers that find themselves in leadership over us are allowed to be there by God's permission, because He's ultimately in control of all the things. I hope those are some thoughts that help spark good conversation with you and your groups. And until we have the opportunity to be together in person again in worship, I hope that you guys have a great week and a good time in the rest of your Connect groups, and that God richly blesses your lives. We'll see you again soon.